This video goes through developing themes and how do you develop themes in thematic analysis, which is the analysis technique by Braun and Clarke, Virginia Braun and Victoria Clarke, which they developed since 2006. And in particular, this material was taken from their latest book called Thematic Analysis, A Practical Guide, which was published in 2021 by Sage Publications. And the material was taken, or in particular, if you'd like to read more, I would suggest reading chapter 4, pages 77 to 91, which goes through how to develop themes in thematic analysis. So Braun and Clarke developed some sort of advice, really useful advice in terms of how do you start developing themes. So you've assigned code labels to segments of your data for your transcripts. And I would suggest, if you wanted to know more about how do you assign codes using Braun and Clarke's methods in thematic analysis, I would suggest reading a video that I just published about assigning codes in thematic analysis. So now you've got your codes. How do you start developing your themes? So Braun and Clarke developed very useful guidance in doing so. So the first one is, think about the themes as not topic summaries. So the themes should not be a summary of codes, and should not be topic summaries. This is very particular for thematic analysis, and in particular, reflexive thematic analysis. Other types of thematic analysis, you might be able to do summaries. So I would also suggest reading if you start going into the path of summarizing your codes, creating themes based on as a way to summarize the code, then you might be looking into something else as an analysis method. I would suggest going back, reading the essence of thematic analysis, the reflexive thematic analysis by Braun and Clarke, and seeing how it differs from other types of thematic analysis, perhaps, or maybe other types of analysis altogether that might suit you better. But for reflexive thematic analysis, they shouldn't be topic summaries. The themes should not be topic summaries or code summaries. Their second advice is that, how do you think about a theme? A theme should be a pattern of shared meaning organized around a central concept. So a central organizing concept is really an idea or a meaning that unites the theme. So think about what unites that theme that you are developing. There should be it should be organized around a central concept. Their third advice is really think about any contradictions or dichotomization, things that are different or offer different meanings within the data, because these could be the basis for a theme development. Do not just get also hung up on initial themes, because these will change. They will change eventually. Also, you might see whether you can spot any broader codes that could be themes. You might occasionally decide that one broader code can actually be a theme, where there is a core idea, but also a variation that sits within there. So think about that. Also, it is important to think about the value of the theme that you are developing. So, because the aim is really to generate a number of working provisional themes and to consider the story they would allow you to tell about your data set in order to address your research questions. So think about the value of the theme that you are developing, and not just this, developing the theme for the sake of developing the theme and getting it over and done with. There should be a value behind that would serve your research questions, and also that tells a story about your data and what participants told you. Use also visual mapping for theme generation, which I did, and it was very useful. Visual mappings like thematic maps that Braun and Clarke recommends, and they give further examples in their book on how to do them. They are very very, very useful visual aids to generate, develop, and review your themes as you go along, as you develop them over time. So their advice is really start from using them from the beginning to think about any provisional themes that could be included in their own right, to explore how these themes, and also to explore how the themes relate to each other, and to start to consider the overall story of your analysis. And they also recommend no more than 3 layers of themes for their method, which is reflexive thematic analysis, if you wanted to go ahead and use their method, which is reflexive thematic analysis. So no more than 3 layers of themes should be enough. How do you develop themes? So, also, there are useful questions to think about when you evaluate themes. So, Braun and Clarke give really useful 4 points as a way to evaluate your themes as you go along. So use these questions to evaluate them. Does your initial theme capture something meaningful? Is it coherent and has a central idea that meshes the data and codes together? Does the theme have clear boundaries around it? Themes need to work together as a whole to tell a story. So do you need to assess themes in relation to the overall story of the analysis that you're telling? So use these prompts or these questions. I found them very, very useful to when I started developing my own themes, and they led to refining the themes over time. So think about the initial theme. Does it capture something meaningful from the data? Is it coherent? Does it have a central idea that meshes the data and the codes together? Does it have clear boundaries, or is it, kind of bouncing on and off between 2 different meanings of the data? And also, do the themes work together and tell a story? And then the final point that they made on how to develop, they advised on how to develop themes is think about your theme level. There is a way to do multiple layers of themes where you could add an overarching theme and sub-themes and so on. So think about your theme levels. Do your analysis type allow these to generate within the data? Now, Braun and Clarke further also gave 5 critical things to keep in mind when you are developing your themes. Again, incredibly useful, and good on them for coming up with these, because they're just very, very useful to contemplate while you develop your themes. So the first one is, are you telling a story or creating a model? So if you're using their method, it shouldn't be a model. Your themes should not be, reflective of a model. So the aim of thematic analysis should be to map the rich nuance and complexity of the data, but not to demarcate a model of the different aspects or elements that you have within them. So they specifically argue that if your aim is to develop a model, then you might need to consult grounded theory, because that could be suited to your analytic task better, or maybe another thematic analysis method, or another analysis method altogether. Within thematic analysis, your job is really become to tell a specific story about your data that would address your research questions. And they say, and I quote, "It is not to represent everything that was said in the data. That would be a different analytic process altogether." That was their quote from page 89. So they see thematic analysis as not needing to capture everything in the data set or all the codes that you developed. You could still keep some codes in play while continuing your coding process as the analysis develops. and sometimes will change dramatically where these become relevant. So keep a record of any unlocated, any miscellaneous codes, as they call them, that you could revisit while you do your analysis. So this is the first critical thing to keep in mind. The second point that they discussed is, think about, does each of your themes have a central organizing concept, which I touched on before. So each theme should have a central organizing concept. This is useful as it clarifies your purpose. It helps determine the essence, if you like, of what a theme represents and whether any codes fit within it. It is about what sense you are making of the codes and the data. What is it really? Think about what is it that holds that theme together. The authors also used a galaxy or a solar system as a metaphor here, where there is something at the core that unites many related but disparate and variable elements together. So a theme can be developed from some, many, or all data items. Their third critical point to keep in mind is prepare to let go. Be prepared to let things go and not get too attached, as themes will change. As simple as that. Their fourth critical point to keep in mind is there is a magic number they see of how many themes there should be. So they recommend 2 to 6 themes maximum for an 8,000 word report. Longer reports like dissertation would offer greater scope to add more themes. This is their advice. So if you are a research student, perhaps doing a master's or PhD, this is something to keep in mind. But their general rule, if you like, is 2 to 6 themes maximum are recommended for an 8,000 word report. And then the fifth thing that they suggested to keep in mind is, don't get too hung up on answering your research question as it is. So keep that in mind. Your task is really to generate themes, interpret patterned meaning, and then tell the reader how these address your research question and what the implication of this is. So themes are kind of evidence of how you answer your research question, but the themes themselves do not directly have to address the research question. So it's important to keep in mind that data and themes do not speak for themselves. This instead will be the role, your role really, as a researcher to tell their story. Okay. Now, how many themes, you might ask, is enough? How many themes do you have to develop? Again, Braun and Clarke also have got some advice on that, which is very useful. So allow each theme the space to develop. Okay. Give it time. An overall summary or overview of key patterns mean more themes. So if you want to present an overall summary or overview of key patterns in your dataset, then you will need more themes. So keep that in mind. Always think richer and more complex themes would lead to less ability to do them justice. So keep that in mind if you're going with richer and more complex themes. Larger numbers of themes can lead to incoherent analysis. Again, something to keep in mind. And also larger numbers of themes can lead to thin and underdeveloped analysis. So whenever you try to and get really tempted to create more themes, think about the implications of having more themes from your data. Whether you're doing them justice, whether they will lead to incoherent analysis, and are you also getting a well-developed and very rich analysis out of them? So all of these things are really important to keep in mind. They also other things to keep in mind when you think about the numbers of themes that you want to go with is. If you have large numbers of themes, go back and check if you have codes instead. So if you end up with a large number of themes and sub-themes, then it is, or it might be worth going back and checking whether you have codes rather than themes. Also ask, if the themes are thin, do they report only one dimension or aspect? If yes, then they are probably codes. And finally, the authors see no harm in reporting on or telling the story of one contextualized theme or few themes in, say, a journal article. So hopefully this gives you an idea about how thematic analysis and developing themes and thematic analysis in particular as they relate to reflexive thematic analysis technique by Braun and Clarke.